as human beings, we all have different conceptions of what's good.
Yeah. What's good, what is that is one of them.
Yeah.
What's good, what the aim of humanity is,
Right.
and the only person that can force one thing is power. So it basically, how do you get a collective idea? Power.
Welcome to the In Spirit podcast from Amoris Christi. Join us as we explore current events and all manner of fascinating topics and explore their connections to Christian living.
Welcome everyone to another episode of the In Spirit podcast. It's a privilege today to have with us Father Jose Lopez. Father, welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, Father Jose is a priest for the Archdiocese of Miami. He's also a systematic theologian, professor at our seminary in St. Vincent de Paul Regional Seminary here in South Florida. So a wealth of experience on the church fathers and so many other topics. And so it's always a joy to speak to you, Father. So thanks for being with us. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah. And so, just anything you guys, we're winding down in seminary. This is our last week. Anything?
Did you teach today?
No. I ended last week.
Yeah. We had
He's one of my students.
Are you teaching all 2 credit or?
2 credit.
Oh yeah. Me too.
Yeah.
Otherwise today would have been the last day of class.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Anything you guys looking forward to, like classes over in the summer?
Well, directing the 30 days, the highlight of my summer, every summer. There's other great things too, but
yeah,
a
lot of ordinations.
Yeah, the highlight of my summer probably would be my trip that I'm going to take to Egypt.
Oh, wow.
I like studying ancient civilizations and things like that, so that would be the highlight of the summer.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah. Well, Father, we know that you grew up in Cuba, and, you grew up there. And it's a topic we also wanted to talk about, the topic of communism is what we wanted to talk about. And so we just wanted to, explore that topic a little bit. People have different ideas, conceptions of communism, what it looks like. So how was it growing up, in Cuba, studying in school there under a communist government?
The first thing is that to clarify is that one thing is to say that you are a communist, another thing is actually trying to make it so, because the first thing is that basically totalitarian systems tends to use the communism as a justification for being just totalitarian, oppressive, dictatorial system. That is the first distinction, because a country said we are communists doesn't necessarily even mean that they are trying to get there. The second thing is that even apparent communist country, when you actually look at them, they are actually not communists, they are socialist, because communism is the last stage of socialism. It's the ideal state of society that we are reaching. But everybody, including those countries that even in public say communism, when you read them, they're for the most part socialist countries.
Got it.
Even the USSR, I think, is that is Union of Socialist Republics, or something like that. So it's not full-blown communism, because communism is the last stage of a process, of a revolutionary process.
But Cuba does identify as communist, right?
They identify as communist, but they are not. I mean, Cuba is a totalitarian society. However, it is true that in the culture and the milieu and so on, especially at the beginning, that was the intention, to be communist. And also, the experience of Cuba is the experience of being in a communist country, because almost all of them follow the same pattern. If you look at them.
So for myself and as well for our listeners, how do we make this? What is the distinction that you see between communism and socialism?
The distinction is that in socialism, the means of production, and that is are controlled by the government or the people, by an entity above everybody else, but at the means of production, not like your toothpaste or your shoes. That is not owned by the government. The communism, everything will be owned by the government, or everything is owned by whatever is above. Usually it's the people, and so that is already a difference. One is the means of production, the other one is actually having everything in common. And that is more or less the word communism, what it means, having everything in common. But of course, you cannot get to a house as person, hey, give me your shoes. I mean, and so even the communist ideologues think that there needs to be a progression in which we are adapting more and more people toward that idea of like everything is in common.
Starting with the means of production.
Starting with the means of production, and then later on with everything.
Factories, companies that produce anything, they all need to be owned by the state. They can't be owned by a person, right?
By a person.
Yeah. And as an individual, you wouldn't be able to own any kind of a business.
Not really.
Yeah.
Now, of course, communism in terms of economy have been a disaster because it takes away the incentive and all of that. So every socialist country or country that wants to be communism end up having a breed, half and half, because if you go full-blown socialist or full-blown communist, the whole place collapses. So they allow for certain amount of individual ownership of means of production. Usually it's a co-ownership. Like, there is an aspect that is from the state and an aspect that is for an individual owner.
So is the idea that everything in the country is shared by everyone?
Yeah, that's communism. Yeah, everything is shared by everybody, and everybody contribute to the whole.
Yeah,
whatever they can, and they take from the whole for themselves what they need.
What they need. Like what we see in the Acts of the Apostles.
Exactly. Well, exactly.
That's the ideal, in a sense, that they're striving for, right?
Yeah.
I want to pull this apart a little bit more and wrestle with some of these ideas. But first, could you describe what it was like growing up in Communist Cuba? You left when you were, was it 18? 18, yeah.
So growing up as a child are very malleable, and you don't understand reality too much, and your parents take care of you, and you enter in, this is the world, so you don't think too much of it. So because it's a collective society, not only because of communism, but also because of the nature of living in an island, and communism tends to be collective. It's a collective mentality. So as a child, your neighborhood, everyone knows who you are, everybody knows everybody, so you can run in the streets, it's safe, because it's kind of totalitarian, so they can crack down very hard on
plus side of being in a totalitarian society.
Exactly, it's safe. So as a child, it's great because you go out and you play and you have no worries, and your parents have no worries, and everybody have this sense that we take care of everybody here. So as a child, it's a good thing. The bad thing becomes when you start entering into being a teenager, in which I would love to be this or that, and then they start telling you, but you cannot be an engineer or a mechanical engineer because we need 4 at this moment. So compete with others, and the smartest ones are the one that we're gonna get. If you don't get it, you don't get it. Do something else. So already you start bumping against the limitations, the constraints of
kind of reminds me of overprotective parents.
Yeah.
You grow up with parents who provide every single thing you need, and it's all wonderful, you're safe. But then as your individuality starts to flourish and you try to individuate, that's when it becomes a problem, right?
Exactly.
Stop thinking for yourself.
Yeah.
We're going to tell you what you need to do.
Yeah.
If you conform, there's peace.
If you conform, there's peace. Exactly. If you don't conform, then you are maladapted. And so on. And they say it. You are maladapted. You are not. Yeah. There are many words that were telling you are not conforming, and that is bad. And you are a bad person because of that. You must be something wrong with your head if you are not trying to conform to the collective.
It sounds like a violation of the freedom of the individual in a way, right?
In communism, some people have said that communism at the end up being a serfdom to an anonymous collective, because your freedom is exchanged for security and stability, and you are at the end one cog in the machine running a collective that unexistent collective is doing amazing, but while all the other human beings are suffering. But that is the aspect of more or less the psychological aspect, the development, right? But then the other side is that communism fails economically constantly because there is not the natural incentive for the person to strive. It have a major, and I think is the greatest flaw, is the anthropological flaw. It's anthropologically erroneous.
So just coming back for a second, as a child, it was fine.
Yeah.
You had a good sense of community. People were tight knit. It's an island culture. But as you started in your teenage years, you felt the tension. Is that what you?
No. Also, like as a child, there is signs. For example, my family was always Catholic, and so I hold the identity of my family, right? And there is small persecutions. I mean, he's a child, so we kind of tolerate it. But like, for example, the classical thing is close your eyes and ask God for a candy. And then you close your eye, and of course you get nothing. And now close your eyes, ask the revolution for a candy. And they put candies,
What?
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah, that was a practice.
Oh my goodness.
That was a practice. Now, you see who is real? So, and that's, of course, you are the idiot. You are presented as the stupid child that believes in these fantasies, fairy tales. So you start having, like, even as a child, you start having a little bit of a thing. Also, like, you will not receive the stars in the tests, or like, well, what do I mean, my family says so, but this other thing, but in the school, if I don't say what they want me, I get an F. So it's like you start saying, but I want to say what my mom's, so even as a child, you start having those issues.
Including about God.
Including about God. I mean, yeah.
Or about God, religion, and stuff like that.
Yeah, you are discriminated.
Is that the main thing that you're discriminated against, or in terms of their agenda? Was it mainly God?
I don't...
Like you said, you couldn't speak anything about God. And you
couldn't hear music. Like, for example, diversionismo ideológico, and I have to say it in Spanish because that's how it was filed. Ideological diversionism. Diverting ideologically.
Yeah.
So if you like, my time, it was softer, but in my father's time, if you heard the Beatles, you are wrong. You should not hear this American thing. They are the enemy. Everything they do is bad.
Oh, wow.
And also, like, they are talking about freedom and these 60s, like, liberation that divert your mind from the goal of the collective, and that is bad. So, like, why do you wear jeans? This is an American thing. What are you trying to say? Are you trying to subvert the revolution? Why are you, and not only that, like, even more close to home, why are you having the hair like that? Why are you expressing, what can you not be like everybody else?
Oh.
You must have a problem.
Maladaptive.
Yeah.
And that have consequences. Some of the consequences, they may shave you.
Yeah.
One day to teach you a lesson.
Yeah, I agree. Just based on what you're saying, I agree. Like, there's a serious anthropological risk to all this, in terms of, like, it feels like in a way you're, like, closing in on yourself. You're getting, like, suppressed in a way, and
you experience a constant suppression. And you generate a second nature of lying, because you gotta survive. I mean, if you've openly defiled, you're gonna get into the gulag, which there were gulags. If you were gay, you go to the gulag. If you were religious, like a priest or something, they may send you to the gulag. Anything that is diverting from their norm, the one that they made up, you were put into a program to fix you up.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I think in any repressive system, again, whether it's parents, whether it's certain types of schooling or governments, people tend to live hidden lives. They sort of split themselves into their public persona and then their hidden life, and that's what you would see there, right?
And that generates suffering.
And lying. I'm glad you said that, right? Because from an American vantage point of living in a free society, as Catholics, I've noticed that we can be judgmental about other cultures because of how comfortable they are with lying, right? But we forget that not everybody grows up in the same environment. I'm not trying to justify and say, oh, lying is okay, but we have to understand that for here in America, there's never a need to lie.
Yeah.
Like for example, when certain immigrants come here from certain countries, depending on the nature of their country, they default to misleading on their taxes. Maybe not straight up lying, but giving the wrong idea. Well, that's how you survived if you grew up in a communist country or...
Which, by the way, that is because also this is the best case. Let's say the communist society is doing wonderful and being just and according to their principle. But usually, since they start failing economically, then they start basically not paying well their workers and so on. And they start what you would call stealing from the worker by inflating the currency and so all those type of things. So at some point, if the worker is not willing to steal from the government, you will not survive. And now even the church has got wrestled with that and said, like, you know what? That is actually not stealing. That is occult retribution. You are just giving to yourself that which you are due.
Yeah.
So it's not actually stealing. And
that's an actual moral principle, right?
Yeah.
With the universal destination of goods, like everybody has a right to food. So if you're hungry, stealing, it's not stealing. But you saw that in actual,
it's like daily living. And it gets to a point in which the government knows it, everybody knows it, is the way you live, the way life happen. The only thing is that they would always have over you a sword. They always have, like, since everybody's stealing, the day that I don't like you, not only we have a motive to crack down, and they would be technically right. You are stealing.
Wow.
Everybody's stealing. So it's very easy to put people in jail and things like that.
So you're always living in fear.
You're always living in fear.
And when did you start becoming more aware of this stuff? Like around what age?
In my case, since I was in a Catholic family, a dissident family, how they call us, even though we did play the game a little bit, but we were dissident. By the time I was 10, I was very aware of it.
Oh,
wow, really?
Yeah, very aware of it, 10, 12. But I would say by the time I was 10, because it's not hard to pick up on it. Any smart kid can pick up on it, and you can pick up in the duplicity of it, in the arbitrariness of it, because communism devolves eventually into power, into who have the power, who doesn't have the power. Oh, we are all equal, but then the son and the daughter of the first minister of the Communist Party is living lavishly, while you don't. So from a kid, it's really easy to say, like, this is not what.
Because you have a brain.
You have a brain.
That's the one thing they can't control, the fact that you have a brain. Okay, so you started realizing that in your teenage years and such. And you had a very particular high school experience, didn't you?
Oh, yeah, because also this is what happened. The revolution was started by young men in their 20s. So teenagers and 20s, they are problematic. They are always trying to do a revolution. So, like, what do we do with them? And also parents figured it out, and, parents instill in their children, like, you got to find a way to live. So they came up with the brilliant idea, let's put them all in concentration camps.
Concentration camps?
I mean, that's how I call it. They never call it that. They call it, no, we're going to provide you with free education, free high school education. The only thing is, it doesn't going to be in the city. It's going to be out there in the fields.
Oh.
And in that way, you also work in the fields, in picking up potatoes and all of that. So you in some way pay for your education too. Pay to the collective for the great education that is giving you, which, by the way, you should be thankful about, because even picking up all these potatoes, you will never be able to pay how much or wonderful education, the wonderful education that we are giving you. So wonderful strategy, end up, especially the major cities, exiling all the kids, and now that want to go, all the kids of the young men that may be threatening to the revolution. Actually, interesting of the structure is that if you want to be a veterinarian or something that kind of the government thought is like low class, no, but you don't have to be very smart, and so on, those could stay in the city. and so people that are not thinking too much, they can stay in the city. But if you want to be an engineer, a biologist, a historian, anything that have to do with brain, you gotta go to the gulag. So we make sure in these times in which like young men do revolutions and are not excited and fearless, they are not able to do one. So I grew up there. And by the way, it was like about 500 kids, the multiple schools, about 500, 600 depended, men and women, together in those places.
And it's like a boarding school?
It's like a boarding school. Men and women, but now we don't sleep together. There was a wall, but it was actually very easy to cross. And you grow there with the professors, away from your parents.
And
you felt it oppressive.
Oh yeah, that oppressive. It
like
was even more oppressive.
While you were going through it, you felt it to be oppressive?
It was even way more oppressive because now your parents are not there, so there's not a refuge for your home, so you are exposed. Also, like, it's very communist in the sense, like, it's like a barrack. It's like bomb beds, and there's 100 kids in there. And by the way, the professors leave in the evening. There is 1 or 2 professors stay with 500-600 kids. And an age in which your hormones are racing, so people are fighting. So it was a very violent environment too.
Dang.
Very violent. So you gotta tough it up.
And how
did you end up leaving?
Cuba?
Yeah.
My grandma came over here to the States at some point, and she asked for family reunification. Now, at the time that happened, Cuba has signed a treaty with United States that the United States will lift some sanctions, and then Cuba will allow people to leave, and they don't follow those things too much, but in the first year or so they do. So that's how I left.
Your whole family?
My whole family came over here.
But there was no obstacles? There was
actually at that time I just finished that boarding school or gulag, and then and I was supposed to go for 2 years to military service.
Wow.
2 years to military service, mandatory.
That was required. Okay.
Required.
Yeah.
Which is even worse. It's even worse. But since my visa just arrived before that, they basically said, allow me to leave. However, before I left, they forced me to go before a panel of generals, Cuban generals, and they questioned me. My parents wanted to stay in, and they said, "Oh, you don't come in, only him." And then they start telling me like, "Hey, in America is racist, and you're black. Are you ready to be? Are you ready to get the dogs thrown at you?" And I said, "I always like dogs. I always like dogs. I think I get along with them, So they start getting annoyed and all that. And
dang.
Yeah.
When you look, it seems like you've been here now in the U.S. for many years now, and since you were 18, and then looking back, do you see any advantages to growing up in that system compared to a system that we have here? I guess it makes you get thick skin, but
Yeah, definitely that. Also, I think you are more exposed to humanity. They force you, because at some point, everybody's oppressed. Even those who are rich or network with the exploited class, you have to be even way more duplicitous. So at the end, everybody is oppressed. So that forces you to be more human, or engage at a certain level that is very human. Because you are forced to live in a facade. So you are very capable of distinguishing fake and ideology from reality. You get good at that. So you come here and, for example, I came here and see people are super enthralled with certain structure and all that. I'm like, somebody made that up. So don't give it all your love or your affection, because some human being made that up, and now we are forced to live it. It may be good, but it may be terrible. So think about it. And not every system of ideas, because it looks good, is actually good. It may be flawed and terrible. So really discern, and especially especially when it's your own culture, because it's harder to see. So there is advantage to it.
Are you happy here in America, or did all the racists bring you down?
No, the racists did not bring me down. The racism did not bring me down.
They didn't throw the dogs at you
I
when
have
you
never
got here?
seen one, even though I love them.
Still waiting on one.
I'm still waiting.
Well, it's good. I mean, thanks for sharing your story. Let's start pulling apart the ideas a little bit. So you made a point earlier about how communism, it really just can't work. Socialism can't work. Do you want to expound on that a little bit in terms of like ownership and?
I mean, it can work if you change humanity, and if you turn us all into ants. Yeah, for sure, ants are communist. But if that's not your desire and you want to continue existing as a human, yeah, it doesn't work, because there is the presupposition that first of all, that the common good is equal for everybody. The first flaw that I would say is, like, what is the common good? Who defines that?
Right. Yeah, because you were talking about the goal of the collective. You said if you're not aligned with the goal of the collective, you're maladaptive. What's wrong with you? Why aren't you conforming to the goal of the collective? And I was wondering, as you were saying that, what is the goal of the collective? Right.
Yeah.
I mean, like, did they ever inculcate that in you? Like, this is the goal of the state or something like that? Or was it just
there is catchy phrases, basically. Nobody can, is incoherent. Therefore, you cannot actually say anything. So basically you end up saying, like, the collective is moving forward, it's advancing together. So all these catchy phrases that are empty. It is like the well-being and the development of the people and their happiness, according to what you say, and so on. So it's never articulated, because it cannot be articulated.
So the reason why communism cannot work is because, as human beings, we all have different conceptions of what's good.
Yeah. What's good? What is that is one of them.
Yeah.
What's good? What the aim of humanity is,
right.
And the only person that can force one thing is power. So it basically, how do you get a collective idea? Power.
So that's why communism becomes
Totalitarian.
totalitarianism.
The only way to get to that is power. Reality doesn't allow you to easily find a common, this is what humanity is made for.
Is the idea then that, just taking an ideal communist world, is the idea then that the whole collective together determines what the common good is? Is that the idea?
That's the idea, but then that's the idea, that's the theory. But then when you actually put them into practice, you realize that we have all these factions. There is not consensus. I mean, the only consensus, maybe more or less everybody wants to live, be alive. It's very small consensus.
Eat.
That's true.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to eat.
Whatever. Even like sexuality, not everybody actually wants it. So naturally, it's very different. I mean, I'm a celibate. So.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I mean, I was just reading about, what are they called? Antinatalists or something like that?
Antinatalists, yeah.
There's like a whole movement of people around the world that are against having children.
Yeah.
Because we shouldn't bring any more people into this world.
Literally,
so I mean, like, even on something that basic or primitive, you'll have differences.
Exactly.
Right?
That's why also communist society end up oppressing homosexuals. Because it's like, even at the biological level of attraction, you don't conform. What do you do with that? Their solution is basically kill them. So they start is power and cutting humanity, and so you cannot arrive to it in practice. In theory, maybe.
At a personal level, I've experienced that, and I'm sure everyone who's been in leadership, the temptation to use power to bring everyone in line.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, even when you're teaching a class, like high schoolers or whatever, and everybody's chaotic, and there's like this balance. Now they're kids, and so it's not the same thing, but like there's a balance between, I want to persuade them, especially if you're teaching them the faith, for example, I want to win them over. I want to show them the beauty of this, but I'm tempted to just, all right, that's it. Everybody, blah, 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 blah. You go down the power route.
Yeah, the power route.
Right? Whenever you're trying to bring, so imagine tens of thousands of millions of people trying to bring consensus, the temptation to power is quite great.
It's quite great. And that's why also I said this part, but also that's why also they persecute religions. They persecute belief. But when you go into religion, faith, and belief, there's no consensus. And how do you generate the consensus? Because you cannot fully appeal to reason, because there is reason for either this one or that one. So like the only solution is like religion is nocive. We cannot do anything with it. Let's destroy it. That's why they persecute religion, because like you don't conform, and there is no rational argument that we can do. There is not anything in reality that we can point out. So like, well, destroy it.
There's something transcendent, and that's a threat.
And that's a threat also, and also they're posting that there is something beyond the collective.
Right.
You should worship the collective.
Right.
No, there cannot be something beyond the collective, because you may want to live for that instead for us, for the collective. So that is problematic for them. So inherently, you have to get rid of religion.
So this, just irrespective, even in an ideal communist state, the system itself is wrong, you would say, right?
Yeah, the system itself is
wrong. There's no
wrong.
Ideal system in a communist.
There is no ideal way to accommodate for human diversity.
Yeah, unless it's by free association, like what you see in the Acts of the Apostles, right? In other words, I want to belong to this community because of these shared interests and this common way of life.
Yeah.
I think that, I mean, that does work.
Yeah,
we know that
work.
from the religious communities, the monastic communities, and many other associations.
Communism, the main problem in that regard is a problem of scale. It's not scalable.
Yeah, but also coercion.
And coercion.
Because you're saying everyone who lives here has to be in. Right? So there's no other way other than by coercion. You can't have free association. You can't say, if you want to be part of the communist country, you can, but otherwise you're free. Like that,
and also like the communism depends of people working for the collective. So like they do need that to do so, to survive. And so you don't have also the freedom of like, oh, I tap out, I'm just gonna leave.
Right.
No, because if a certain mass of people leave, we cannot do soap. We need you here doing this stuff, but I don't want to do that. You need to do so. You cannot like say like, I don't want to do that anymore. No, you need to do it, because that is the way we function.
Why did you say that it was not scalable? Because
I mean, a free association of 3 people, we could end up with a consensus because of our bringing the same religion and all of that. We can get out more or less of a consensus, like, I think life is about this, and we have discussed it and so on. But that is not scalable. Like at some point you have dissent. Just by biological means, like again, not everybody is attracted to everybody, to the same thing biologically. So that person that is biologically different is not able to enter into the consensus. And then ideas are very diverse. It's very hard to get everybody thinking the same. And because we have different experience, I
mean, I think if you wanted to do something at scale, you would need to form a consensus that accommodates for diversity, sufficient diversity, not complete diversity, because you need some ground of unity and you need the rules of the game, so to speak. They have to be agreed on, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
That's what every country is. Essentially, there is a consensus, but it's a consensus that allows for sufficient diversity. As opposed to this.
But because that's what is flawed, because they want to bring an equality. In all realms, in all aspects, they don't want diversity. They don't want to have a diversity, because also they seek to have, even though you don't have the same input, you are not able to give as much, you end up with the same outcome. That is a desire. And when you scale that, it doesn't do well.
I mean, what's a solution to the problem of inequality, right? So let's kind of paint the picture here. I mean, you drive down the street and you see, like in a city, for example, you see people who are clearly from different classes, right? And that's in any country that you go to. So on the one hand, there is this idea that your output should be proportionate to your input.
Yeah.
You work hard, you get rewarded. That seems to make sense. But there are other types of disparities that we see in society, which I think the critique of communism, of Marxism, is class differences, right? And when you think about it in terms of classes, especially, I mean, America's perhaps better than traditional Western society in terms of classes, right? I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's probably better. But you think of traditional free society even, you've got different classes and you're born into a class which determines the range of possibilities. Realistically, the range of possibilities. I mean, there's always going to be an outlier on both sides, right? But like if you're born into a poor class, starting from the earliest ages, the opportunities that you're given, the education that you're given, all of that become limiting factors.
Yeah.
And it's also tricky because I don't know. It's just a complicated problem. When you see that, we're like, well, this kid, he's the same as that kid. But this kid is provided with all kinds of opportunity and comfort and luxury and health care and all that stuff. And I guess the thing is like, what's our solution to that problem?
Like for example, definitely, I mean, there is something about it. Otherwise, it would not be popular, communism.
Right.
So there is true that this problem of class and wealth and so on needs to be looked at and needs to be corrected. And even like malnutrition will not get you too far.
Right.
Because your brain don't have the stamina to actually think much. So like in that sense, there is something to trying to provide at least a minimum of dignity and capacity for the person to strive. By the way, that is good for everybody. Because if I do Elon or like Steve Jobs or any of those were a kid and I knew they were going to be what they are now and they have no food, I would give it because it's good for humanity. I want you to have the potency because you have the potency.
Right. So you see every human being as a gift. As a
potential for the well-being of the whole. Now, that is the Catholic social teaching. But what with Marx goes wrong is that he's not that sophisticated in that way. And he's sophisticated, but he make mistakes. And is the mistake that it is mostly about who have capital and who doesn't, meaning who have the means of production and who have a money basically to invest. And he says like that's the main difference. I mean, there's all different, but that's the main difference. Who have the means of production that end up giving you a surplus that you can better yourself. That surplus should be redistributed for everybody, so everybody kind of have what you have. But the problem with that is that nature have not gifted us equally. Right. Not everybody have the same capacity, intellectual capacity. If a person have a good intellectual capacity and you give them $1 million, he may be able to do $100 billion. Another person will waste it in 5 years, buy 3 houses, 2 golden cars, and that's it. And
that's true.
And that's it. So there is an inherent inequality in nature.
That's the more fundamental question, you have to kind of wrestle with, right? It's more metaphysical or whatever. I mean, it's not just about the way we organize our society. It's just, I mean, you find it in the animal kingdom.
Exactly. So if you don't account for that, then you end up, you don't account for that, you end up wasting a lot of excedent, that's how I call it, another excedent on people or giving it to people that are not capable of multiplying it. So you kill it, and therefore that's why also the communist society is so terrible in economy, because you end up their surplus, instead of giving it to the guy that have the brain, and have the intellect, gifted intellect by nature, you end up like taking all sorts of other accounts for it. For example, like, oh no, everybody's equal, so forget about that. That's not a question. That's not something that we really process. We account for conformity to the collective. That is the person that should be in charge of the wealth and distributing and investing the wealth, because he have the most loyalty to the collective.
Yeah, I guess it's like an equality of outcome in a way through the communist system, whereas I think in a democracy, irrespective of the inequality between, the people, there is a striving for an equality of opportunity for every person. Whether what he does with that $1 million, but does he have that opportunity to reach that?
That would be the way. Like
that's the ideal.
That's the ideal.
I want to say, like, in the ancient world, let's say pre-capitalism, when you think about a powerful person accumulating more power, it doesn't benefit the whole. For example, let's say you're Alexander the Great, and you have a big army, and you go down and you start conquering place after place after place. All right, great. You just keep accumulating more power, and people might surrender to you because they're, well, either I surrender to you or I die, right? Their life could actually end up worse by you getting more power. The unique thing about capitalism is that a person who is growing in stature, growing in wealth, how do they get wealth? Right? They can't just steal it, right? They can't just go conquer a nearby country and take all of its natural resources and say, all right, great, now I'm rich. They actually have to render some service to society and have many people pay them for that service in order to grow rich. So when a person is becoming rich, that means that at least, I'm not saying it's perfect, right? But there's at least some proportionate betterment of society as a whole.
Yes, exactly.
Reflected in his wealth.
And also, like, because they want to equalize everybody, they stop competition. Communists do. So that is the natural way by which we redistribute again. You are outcompeted and basically eat up by something else. If you are not providing those services, like exactly, but they stop that because they don't believe that competition in some ways is good, because you should not be competing with this one. You are equal. Why are you like lording your intellect or your physical strength over the other guy? We should stop that, because nature is inherently wrong. And so you stop competition. So one of the ways by which naturally we overcome or this power grab is get out of the picture. So it's problematic. But now I do believe in laws against monopoly and things like that. So only super capitalism that I think doesn't completely work either.
Right. Yeah. You can't say it's a perfect system, and there's definitely holes in it.
Yeah.
But it is
a better system.
Yeah, because in the situation you described in the communist country where they're going to redistribute your wealth, and you had pointed to this in the beginning, the lack of incentive. Right. So, okay, I can apply myself in a medium way. I mean, you look at some of these successful American entrepreneurs, and I mean, if you genuinely study their life and their trajectory, they work extremely hard, and not just hard, but smart too. And they try to tap into the best that's out there, the best information that's out there, and constantly thinking, strategizing. I mean, a lot of them hardly sleep in certain cases, right? I mean, Elon Musk famously, would sleep on the warehouse floor and all that kind of stuff. I mean, to be with the, so, and that's just one example, but all these guys, I mean, a lot of them. But let's say all of your wealth is going to be redistributed because you're equal to your brother, your comrade. there's perhaps not that incentive.
There is not that incentive, and they know it, and the way by which it was so human and so patent that they couldn't get rid of it. So the way they managed to kind of give a little solution to that is giving you awards, papers, and medals. That's why you can see all these medals. That's the only way they could more or less give you an incentive.
Yes.
But that's not as good as an incentive. And again, you are generating another form of class.
Yeah, it's another form of capital even. I mean,
another
in a
form
sense,
of capital,
you know.
Another form of leverage.
Yeah.
Okay, you may not own it, but you have more access to the to the wealth of the collective.
Yes.
Which happened like, the house in the beach with the nice balcony to the sunset and so on is collective. Everybody can go, but you can go a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because we have to give you more as incentive. Okay, it's in the collective, but I'm for the most part living there. The other people are not. So what is the distinction? A paper that said it's yours when you actually are the one that actually enjoy it more. So at the end, it's very difficult. It doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, and so you raised a good point about the reason why communists exists is because there is a problem, and people feel the weight of that problem. And we talked about the class differences probably being the basis of that. If you're from a poor class, and the majority of people are in the poorer class, and you see these few people who get to live like kings, you get angry. And somebody can play with your anger. And I mean, that's what Marx was basically saying. Religion is trying to calm you down and say, hey, don't worry, your reward is in the afterlife. That's why I think he was so against it, because he wanted the anger to be stirred up so that there could be truly a revolution, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And you can overthrow the classes. So again, I mean, I come back to the problem of classes, and everything else to me sort of makes sense. Okay, there's different natural competencies. There's just no way around that.
Yeah.
Look, if you're just better at math or whatever, I mean, you're going to be better at math. Yeah. I mean, that there's just no way around that. But the idea to me that is difficult to swallow is that just depending on where in the world you're born, or where in the country or what neighborhood you're born in, that life could look very, very, very different. Yeah. That's just harder for me to swallow. I'm not, you know what I'm saying? Like if you inherit, like you these kids of these billionaires or many generations down, you take like a Rockefeller family, whatever family, they just have millions and billions of dollars of wealth having done nothing.
Yeah. That's why in a certain sense, like even though after living in a communist society and experiencing is evil, I am not opposed to like services like education, medicine that in some way are socialized, because you do some equalization and allow for the potency of that human person to express if it's there. Or if another thing is that not everybody wants to be Elon Musk throwing rockets to the moon, or some people just want to eat, go dancing at night, and that's what constitutes the good life for them. And I hope we give them a chance to do that. Yeah. That is another thing that is destructive about communism. Basically, everybody, like in Cuba, have a nice farming, and everybody was doing their farming and raising the pigs and the cows, and they were happy, and they got enough money to raise their children and do their life. Communism came in and said, like, you guys, you are of a lower class, and you should aspire to a higher class. They actually were effective in that. Everybody abandons the fields, and nobody wants to be now a farmer, because nobody wants to be in the low underdog class, even though there will be happily plenty just doing that. But now you have created a resentment. You have created a sense of being below the people, and all. There are many levels by which this thing fails. I do believe that you can give enough, so whoever wants to get to whatever place they want, they have a shot at it.
Right. Yeah. Right. In terms of nutrition, in terms of basic medical care, in terms of an education.
And then from there, that's the basic level in which we can come up with some formula. We can say, like, definitely for the brain to develop well, it needs the X amount of nutrition. Now, not every to some level, because it happened. This is another way by communism fails. Our nutritional requirements are different because our bodies are different. So the nutritional it's not like you can say like we give you give milk to everybody, because they try to do that, but then even that is not sufficient. You have to account for the person, so you have to allow for freedom. The wealth should be there, but you should not control it as much. Like, give them money, let them buy it. But in communism, it's so controlling that you get 2 ounces of milk, 1 bread, this amount of, which have been one of the problems. It started, by the way, by the communists themselves in Russia, that they were the ones that did that study and came up like, actually, this doesn't work because the nutritional requirements of different people are different. That's communist Russia.
And that's just one example, right? Because in every way, human beings are different in terms of their needs. That's actually what some communities that have tried to do, the let's hold everything in common, especially with families. This was more common in, maybe in the 70s and 80s and stuff, Catholic communities. Some of the ways they've struggled are like that, because they're like, okay, well, you have 5 kids, so this is how much you should get. You know what I mean? And it's just, they quickly realize like, this is not working. You know, I mean, I don't think any of them lasted. They all at least abandoned that aspect because of the reasons that you
access.
mentioned.
I think the question is access and freedom, in the sense, like, for example, school of choice. I think it's a great thing, because the intellectual requirements of people are different too.
Yeah, true.
So like, don't try to put everybody in the same sack. Right. So give them the money, give them the access, and let them figure it out. They will figure it out.
Yeah, it's human persons. They always will.
They will figure it out. You are not. That is another problem. Centralized government, pride. So because you acquire this title and that title, you are better than all the rest of the million people to make decisions for millions of people. Are you really that smart? Let people. You are really smarter than this. Is the centralized government. So you think that you guys, because you spend all day over there. I understand to some level, have that special knowledge and competency and so on. Of course, you are a doctor, so of course you spend more time. I'm a priest and a theologian. I spend more time, so I have probably a more informed opinion on certain topics. But to say that I can determine the life of millions of people, that my brain is more capable of millions of people making decisions, is bad. It's a bad computation, and that is another problem of communism, of centralized government. Give them the access. They figure it out with what's the best choices.
Yeah, the experts.
And experts.
You can run into the same problem from a different angle when you have the experts know what is best for you. And that becomes a gray area.
Because the expert, you cannot account for every nuance of social living. Life, the world is complex, and social life is super complex.
So one, it's nuanced, but also like nobody can really claim to have that answer.
No.
I mean, people can give you their opinion about different things, and maybe a very informed opinion, like, okay, Anthony's a doctor here. You know, if he tells me something about, maybe like a small example of that is, what was the thing with the fats? Some people make a big point about how they used to be really critical about eating anything with
saturated fats,
and different things like that. Now, like, the focus is more on carbs and the inflammation that causes the real cause of the blockage and all. You know what I'm saying? Like, somebody can say authoritatively, when I was growing up, they used to say, I'm pretty sure I remember this. They used to say, you shouldn't eat more than 2 eggs a week. You know what I mean? And it's just like, so this is where, you get some skepticism about experts, because it can end up as this. What's the general form of the expert? It's the philosopher king, Plato's philosopher king. There is this man who is so wise and who has been given the governance of all people. He knows how we all should live, right?
Yeah.
So
no, it's too complex. Even like today, your own life. I have this much of imbalance in my feet. And I thought, like, it's not that much, and they never care. At some point, I said, like, let's fix it a little bit. I went to Spain, I got this thing made, and I live with that. When I transitioned back to the States, I lost it. I am like, oh, I lost it. I have to make one. I never did it never did it. The other, and I mean, I go through life seemingly normal. The other day I found it. Oh, it was in these shoes. I was about to throw them away. I'm glad I found it. I have been using it for the past week. The most energy I ever had in years now, in at least 2 years. That little change have exponentially projected my productivity, because I realized now I have been in pain. And I didn't realize it because at some point the body just readjusts, but I was in pain. Therefore, all my mental capacity goes down.
That's why your mental capacity has been so low.
Yeah.
So I was wondering what it was.
Yeah, and I just figured out, actually, this is actually half a perceptual thing in me. I do have more energy. What have been the change? Oh, I just put a little higher thing in one of my shoes, and now I'm like, oh, I'm working, I'm doing my typing.
Those are the nuances you're talking about.
The nuances of life, the complexity.
Yeah.
I can figure it out because I live in my body.
Yeah.
I don't think any expert will figure it out that there is a correlation between, for me, maybe for other person is not, but for me there is a correlation between the imbalance of my spine, the imbalance and work. That cannot be made by somebody else.
Yeah. In light of all this, what do you guys think is an actual proper form of government, right? What is the function of the state? Because we know in the communist idea, really, the state is everything, right? So Cuba, China, they're both, I think, single party communist countries. And to me, this is the rationale behind it, or behind having big government or strong government. Okay, the rationale is we, as a people, we come together. We have debates. We have discussions. We have elections. We elect because is Cuba also democratic?
It's democratic, but the democracy is very different. It's stratified.
Okay, yeah.
You vote for your representative, the representative vote for you, but up to the...
Right, so it's democratic, and so is China.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what they say. So we elect people who we believe represent our needs and our interests, and then it goes up and it goes up, and eventually you are being governed by someone who represents your interests, or by people that represent your interests. Now, why shouldn't we have that as the ultimate and final rule for our existence? Because it allows us to live together in solidarity, as opposed to allowing the markets to play such a big role in our daily lives, where we don't get to elect who runs Microsoft. We don't get to collectively decide on what product they're going to release next year, right? I mean, they decide that based on what's going to be most profitable for them. So the argument is, shouldn't it be government first? Government is everything, and then government kind of delegating power to other institutions.
Now, the interesting thing is that we do actually control what Microsoft sell collectively by not buying it.
Right.
So actually, our decision in capitalism, our decisions are more democratic because you can choose not to buy them and they go under. Actually, they have to conform to our will. It's just that every human being, every consumer is given the drop. So it's actually more democratic than the socialist construction. Every single transaction with every single, because we say the market, but what is the market? Every single transaction that human beings, decisions that human beings are making. And that's why it goes up. It's crazy because we kind of are a little crazy and we switch.
Right. And it's and I think the great thing about it is it's in real time. Whenever you think about the government, you think slow, right? Because you had to go through all these processes or whatever. When you think about the market, it's rapid, because if Microsoft comes out with a bad product and then they come up with another bad product, I mean, okay, there's a certain reputation they have, so we've been using them for many years, so we might try to give them the benefit of the doubt. And people have. I'm trying to remember, what was it, Windows Vista, I think, Everybody was just like, what is this thing? It's terrible. They had to actually conform to the needs of the market. They had to allow companies to downgrade. If I remember correctly.
I was one of the ones that downgraded.
Were you?
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Well,
I don't, it was Vista, I was 10. Vista is the one that I think I downgraded to.
Back to like XP or whatever it was, right?
Yeah.
So the point is like the markets, these companies, they have to dynamically respond to what people want and what they don't want and all that stuff, you know? I mean, I think to me, a funny example, I've never like researched this, so I could be wrong on some of the facts, but I remember when McDonald's was being criticized for being unhealthy, right? Supersize me and all of that. And I'll admit, I'm a little biased towards McDonald's. I love McDonald's. Okay. They've got, but so what do? First of all, they stopped asking the question, right? They used to say, how did it go? Would you like to supersize that? Or they'd ask you something that, you know, if you want to get the larger size. Yeah. And so they stopped asking that question. But also, they started putting out like a lot of salads and stuff. Yeah. Right?
I remember the beginning of salads.
Yeah, I was like, salad at McDonald's?
It felt weird.
It felt weird.
You could get apples with Happy Meals.
Yes, instead of fries, you could get like fruit and all this stuff. But here's the thing. The question is not, what does somebody in a documentary say? Or even what the experts say. The question is, what do people want from McDonald's? That's what ultimate. So in that moment, they had to respond to that because everybody was making a stir about it.
Yeah.
But after that slowly faded, I'm pretty sure nobody was buying salads at McDonald's.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I went to the McDonald's like a month ago, and I said, "Can I get a salad?" Said, we don't have any salads here. You know? I don't know if that's at all McDonald's or whatever, but you know. So to your point, there's a much more rapid and fluid form of democracy that could come about through capitalism.
Yeah, for me, the function of the government is a little bit more the arbiter in how play the game. Meaning, because there are people that don't want to play the game. Big companies tend to instead of competing with the other company, let's acquire the other company and kill it. That is when you are not playing the game.
Right.
And that is when the government should say, no, you are not allowed not to play the game.
Yes.
You have to play the game of the market.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Otherwise, actually, you become a government and some kind of government, and you lose the advantage for society.
Yes.
So, I believe wholeheartedly the Congress should come down and no, you should not do that acquisition because it's not good for you. It's not good for everybody. You need to compete. You need to play the game.
And that's the large-scale consensus we were talking about. If you want to make a consensus that could work with millions of people, the consensus has to be the rules of the game, not the game itself.
Exactly.
The government shouldn't play the game in any way.
In any
way. But they should set the rules of the game.
Yeah, exactly.
But then even in the rules of the game, I guess there's a question of is the rules oriented towards the good of the people? Questions like that come up, right?
And in some way, I mean, I'm not completely opposed to revolution. Sometimes the game is a bad game.
Yeah.
The monarchy was a bad game. So we got rid of it. So because there is space for sometimes this game we don't like and we should get rid of it and play another one. But first of all, that point should not. Hopefully, we play a game that doesn't get there.
But the monarchy wasn't democratic.
No. Yeah.
So it's a lot trickier to say that in a truly democratic country. I mean, obviously the mechanisms of democracy may have to be optimized, but if it's truly democratic, then there shouldn't, in theory, be a need for a revolution because the rules are being set by the populace.
Exactly,
right?
by the populace. The game is changing as we change and we want.
Right, and it makes sense then for the slowness of government because rules should not change rapidly because then nobody can thrive with rapidly changing rules. That's some of the difficulty people have now with the tariffs and wars and all that stuff is the uncertainty is difficult for businesses to thrive when they don't know what to expect.
And exactly, and that is the success of America is very simple. It's stable. It was stable. I mean, have been stable as opposed to other countries that are
correct.
Overturning all the time. So you cannot project yourself and so on in that environment, those climates. So that's the main, I would say that's the main product that the government should provide: stability, peace, and stability, peace, and security.
And I think underlying all of this too is that presupposition that our freedom is not infringed upon. And I think in a way the government has that. For me, I think the government has that right to protect the freedom of the individual, the ability to choose the good.
and it's bound to recognize the goodness of human freedom, so that whatever rules of the game that it devises or that we devise have to actually allow human freedom to flourish and to bring about the greatest possible good for all.
Yeah, and that's why in a way there is something good about like a healthy skepticism about the experts, and but the government provides us the opportunity to exercise that freedom in a way. So I think
if it doesn't, we're in a scary time.
Exactly. Another thing that just to add to that is the importance of the press, of the information, because I want to know what's happening, so to make decisions, the market should be provided with good information. That's why these medias that are co-opted by ideological standpoints are terrible for everybody. Just provide the information, let people play the game. Your part of the game is provide the information. Let me know how much it costs. Let me go the data, the facts.
Well, those are some of the problems of capitalism that you were referring to, right? Because in the traditional media, there's a large barrier of entry. A group of people sitting in a room can't say, hey, let's create a new media company. You know what I mean? You'd have to be one of the major powerful capitalists to be able to do that. But this is, again, the dynamism of a capitalist society is all of a sudden you got new media. You've got people without any infrastructure being able to have a large influence. Right. So again, even that is being toppled over. In a sense, there's a continuous revolution that takes place. Yeah.
That's why when I came to access to the possibility, internet and YouTube and all of that, what do have done, provided that access, provided that infrastructure in which like somebody with an idea can just say something and okay, it works. Exactly. That access to strive, that you don't need to make a company hundreds of millions of dollars to begin in. And I think that however we devise that, I think that should be the case.
Right.
Monopolies are really, that's the danger of capitalism. Monopolies and a price tag so high that other people don't have access to. And sometimes the government plays that role, making so many regulations, so many things that it makes it inaccessible unless you have a massive capital.
Right.
And I know there is some level for regulations and, because the government providing that safety and all of that. But you have to balance the regulation for safety with the value of freedom. And we allowing people for freedom to do, to participate in this market, in this.
Yes. And, I think that competition is just as important as cooperation.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we know that from an evolutionary point of view, because when you look at the way evolution takes place, there's both, right? You have massive amounts of cooperation between different species. I mean, all the way down to like bacteria that are in symbiotic relationships and all that stuff. But you also have the pressure of competition leads to advancement. And I believe that what Adam Smith and the whole kind of capitalist project was attempting to do is to find a way in which both competition and cooperation could coexist or be mutually complementary in a scalable system and even a global system. Yeah. And I think that if, as a society, when we come to a consensus, if we honor that, like you were saying, okay, we can't have monopolies, etc., then we can have a smooth functioning society, which allows for sufficient diversity. So we don't all have to be in agreement on every single thing, but we do have to be in agreement on the foundations of.
Which, by the way, I'm very glad that you bring the biological thing, because the Earth have been doing rounds and rounds and rounds for hundreds of billions of years, and finally, you have make a conscious thing. So you have done something good, So we should look at it and emulate it, because it has created. I mean, I believe in God, a priest, but in some way, if you, even from a biological perspective, this tool that God have used is these billions of years of evolution. Yeah. So we should honor it. It was make us in some way, the way by which we were made. So there is something inherently good there that provides good things. Right. We have to emulate some of that.
Right. And communism, I think, tries to defy the nature.
Yeah, defile nature.
And say that, okay, we can be we're holy, almost like we're in a different realm of pure spirit, where
exactly.
only cooperation is needed, or something like that.
Yeah, exactly, and it's not true.
Yeah,
and I think that's the sad thing for me about communism. Like, the human person is made for so much more, and communism says no. This is where you are.
It closes sky.
It aims high, but it ends up being even lower.
There is a ceiling.
Yeah,
you reach the sky, but the sky is closed.
Yeah.
So there's nothing beyond that. The collective, that's the high, that's the God, and that is problem. That's when it fails.
Right.
It's too small.
This has been fascinating. Thanks. It's always fun talking to you about things, but in this case, it's something that's very personal to you because you grew up in that. Sometimes whenever I meet a communist, a person from Cuba who grew up in communism, I'm like tempted to ask them something about communism, because it usually gets them riled up. You're a lot more balanced than a lot of the Cubans that I've met. Some of them, we both know the same people.
I have saying some things into your sleep, but I think.
Oh, okay. You kind of
toned it
down for the sake of the public. Yeah,
exactly.
Right. Well, good. It's a blessing having you, and Anthony, thanks as always.
Yeah.
Thank you for giving the opportunity to express those things. Also, that is kind of in my subconscious, it's in my mind. I mean, it's the way I grew up, and sometimes I grew up fighting it. So it's great to express that. And thank you.
Awesome. Take care.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the In Spirit podcast. In Spirit is an initiative of Amoris Christi, an apostolate dedicated to lay spiritual formation. For more information and to keep up to date, you can visit our website at amorischristi.org and follow us on social media.